We do have our Major Garrett standing by now. Major, what do you think is the big takeaway here?
Well, a lot of things. Let's not overlook the importance of the Veterans Secretary's announcement about trying to merge electronic medical records for veterans with the system at the Department of Defense. I've never covered the Pentagon on a regular basis, but I have spent some time over there, and I do know, having covered in a general way veterans issues, this is something that's been talked about in Washington for many, many years. It has been one of the underlying bureaucratic problems between the Department of Defense and the Veterans Administration, and an impediment to continuous care, whether it's physical or on mental health issues. So this decision, not to competitively bid it, but to take off-the-shelf software, move directly toward integration with the Department of Defense, may not grab headlines across the country, but it could be a significant change and improvement possibly. Congress will have to go along with it. There'll be an implementation stage. But there are times in Washington where the biggest headline of that day is not necessarily the most important thing that happened in Washington that day. This could be one of those instances where something that's been talked about for a long time is implemented, and then there's a new reality for people who interact with the federal government. And many, many millions of American veterans do that and have had some difficulty with their medical records at the VA, and this could make things better for them over time.
And staying just with this topic, Major, the VA Secretary had said, I don't expect any pushback from Congress when it comes to our veterans. Do you agree with that?
Well, there will be questions asked for certain about what's the cost benefit here. There's a $4 billion budget the Veterans Administration has, as the Veterans Administration Secretary said, for IT uses. He's going to need more than that to put this project in place. So you have to spend money up front without a competitive bidding. And basically the VA Secretary said if we competitively bid this, that's an expensive process and it delays things. We've already figured out the vendor. We haven't figured out the price, but we're going to work on that as rapidly as possible. So oftentimes when there is pushback from Congress about things that are meant to accelerate a government decision, there are stakeholders who want to make sure that just because you're speeding it up doesn't mean you're short-circuiting things that are built into the system to protect the taxpayers or protect the systems itself. So there will be questions for sure about this. And anytime there's no competitive bidding for a government contract, especially one this size, there will be questions. But this administration has made it clear. The default position is speed over process. And this is going to be one excellent example of testing that default position, speed over process.
Major, another topic that was discussed was also talked about when you think about the president picking a fight with the mayor of London, whether or not the president took his remarks out of context or if it was just an effort to sort of strike at a time of tragedy, and if he made a mistake and whether or not he's even offering any regrets. Your thoughts on that?
Well, Sarah Huckabee Sanders did the best she could with what was a very difficult and thin portfolio. Look, the president said things that the mayor of London didn't say. He accused him of making a statement that you shouldn't be alarmed about the situation in London. No mayor of London would make that comment in this context, and no Londoner would believe it. And yet the president tried to make it appear as if the mayor of London was either downplaying or possibly indifferent to this psychological state of anxiety that has gripped London in the last 3 or 4 weeks, and all of the United Kingdom for that matter. And I just tried to get Sarah to take on board the idea that it's not the mayor of London or Londoners who are misinterpreting this. It's the president who, for whatever reason and whatever motive, clearly took the mayor of London's comments out of context and tried to make a point that wasn't there in the first place. She did her best to say the president stands with not only London but the United Kingdom itself and will offer any aid and assistance, but that's not how it's being interpreted there, not at all.
And Major, real quick, the executive privilege. We've learned that President Trump will not use that. He won't exercise that right Thursday.
Yeah, this is a classic example of not invoking something you couldn't in the first place. There is no legal basis on which this administration could credibly assert executive privilege and get away with it. And the administration knows that. And even the lawyers here understand that there's no way on which you could assert executive privilege and get away with it, and by so doing you would not only lose the legal battle, but you would inflame a political situation that I don't think anyone needs to be told is rather inflamed as it exists.
All right, so Major Garrett, any more clarification here on the travel ban and where the president stands on this?
Well, look, the tweets today run this in several different directions. One, travel ban, all caps. There had been some effort by this administration, sort of sporadic, to say it's not a travel ban. Oh, maybe it is. It's extreme vetting. Basically tossing around a lot of different phrases that this administration wants to suggest are interchangeable and don't really matter. Well, guess what? In a legal context, they do and have been cited, as was candidate Trump's rhetoric, about what the intent of this was in the very legal proceedings about the executive order. Point one. Point two, the president on Twitter today made it sound as if he had a renegade Department of Justice that offered up this watered-down second version. Oh, wait a minute. He signed that second version, so it couldn't be that renegade because the Department of Justice put the second version together at his direction to make it more, he thought, legally defensible. And then, to add to the confusion, if we can, the president suggested he wants an expedited review of the Supreme Court, so a much tougher executive order could be put in place, leaving the very tantalizing, or if you're a law professor, confusing prospect of a third executive order trying to implement a travel ban. Remember, this was supposed to be a 90-day travel ban. It's never been put in place. And even if it had been, the 90 days would have expired. So we're essentially left with a vague description of extreme vetting, which Sarah Huckabee Sanders could not describe from the podium with any specificity, and a lot of tweets and a lot of lawyers more fully employed than ever before.
Major, real quick, just how legally dangerous is it for the president just to be sounding off on Twitter when we talk about the travel ban?
Well, don't take my word for it because I'm not a lawyer, but listen to George Conway, who's not only married to Kellyanne Conway, but for a time, it may have been a brief time, but for a time was under consideration to be the next Solicitor General of the United States, the chief lawyer for the White House before the Supreme Court of the United States. He was then considered, though not any longer, for a position in the Justice Department. So you would have to assume he brings some legal credentials to this question. I invite you to take a look at his Twitter feed. All day long, he's been saying over and over, this does not help the president's cause before the Supreme Court. I support the president, I support this ban, but these tweets undermine the very legal basis on which he asserts this authority and creates more questions legally about the motives behind it in the first place. So don't take my word for it. Take it from somebody the president considered to be the next lawyer before the Supreme Court of the United States, George Conway.
All right, and Major, we know you got to go. Just one last thing here. Another headline out of the day, those 5 Arab states breaking ties with Qatar. We heard from Sarah Huckabee Sanders reacting to that, really not saying much but a mere sentence there. What do you think? How is the White House not reacting to something sort of this big in that region?
A short sentence, but one key word, de-escalate, which suggested to me that the administration would like to try to reduce the level of diplomatic confrontation that has ramped itself up quite dramatically in the last 24 to 48 hours. We did not have a chance to follow up on that, but de-escalate is the one word I think that will reverberate throughout the region as to what this White House thinks about these moves.
And we see why he is the chief White House correspondent. All right, Major, thank you. Major Garrett reported in Washington. Good to see you, Major.
Thanks.